He begged them, not metaphorically, not in the way politicians sometimes appeal to their colleagues with carefully chosen words and a firm handshake. Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, the man who won the largest parliamentary majority in a generation, stood in a room with 400 of his own MPs and peers and begged them not to remove him from office. And before he walked into that room, 2 of his closest allies had already walked out the door. This is the story of 48 hours that nearly ended Starmer's premiership. 2 resignations, a Labour heavyweight publicly calling for him to quit, a room full of his own MPs deciding whether to finish him. And through all of it, one woman on the opposition benches, who had already told you exactly how this would end. Kemi Badenoch called it before the resignations. She called it before the coup attempt. She called it before the apology to Epstein's victims. And the 4 words she used to describe this Prime Minister are the 4 words that will follow him for the rest of his political career. He is like a plastic bag blowing in the wind. We are going to show you exactly how she was right. Every step, every decision, every moment where a leader should have led, and this one didn't. Mainstream media gave you the managed version. The official statements, the careful language of people still trying to protect themselves. This is the full picture. Stay with me. Let's start with Morgan McSweeney. Because this story doesn't begin with the resignations. It begins with a decision. McSweeney was the most powerful unelected figure in British politics. Chief of Staff, the man who controlled access to the Prime Minister, the man who shaped government strategy, managed Downing Street day to day, and made the calls that determined how this government operated. When Starmer became Prime Minister, McSweeney came with him. They were inseparable. What McSweeney recommended, Starmer did, and what McSweeney recommended was Peter Mandelson. Mandelson as Britain's ambassador to the United States, the most important diplomatic posting in the world, the face of Britain in Washington. And McSweeney pushed for it, personally, championed it relentlessly, and used his position at the heart of Downing Street to make it happen. Why? Because McSweeney and Mandelson go back more than 2 decades. When McSweeney was a young man starting out in Labour politics, Mandelson mentored him, shaped him, took him under his wing. By the time Starmer was in Downing Street, McSweeney had risen to the top of British political power, and he used that power to install his mentor in the most prestigious job available. Here's what they both knew when they made that decision. Mandelson had resigned from government twice. Twice. His reputation for operating in the grey areas of political ethics had earned him the nickname, the Prince of Darkness. And his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, a convicted sex offender who abused dozens of young women before his death in prison, was publicly known before Starmer ever signed the appointment papers. The official security vetting process flagged the relationship. The system that exists specifically to identify risks before senior appointments are made gave the Prime Minister the information. The warning was given, and Starmer appointed him anyway. You know what that means, right? This was not an oversight. This was not an administrative failure. This was a Prime Minister who received a warning, had that warning confirmed by his own security process, and chose to proceed because the man he trusted most told him to. That decision is the cause. Everything else, the resignations, the coup attempt, the emergency meeting, the apology, is the consequence. Now let's talk about the collapse, because when it came fast. Subscribe to this channel right now. What you are about to hear is the full account of those 48 hours. Mainstream media gave you the press conferences and the official statements. They did not give you this. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because this is only the beginning. Within a single day of each other, Morgan McSweeney and Tim Allen were gone. McSweeney first. His resignation statement was 4 words away from a full confession. He wrote that the decision to appoint Peter Mandelson was wrong. He wrote that he was taking full responsibility for advising the Prime Minister to make the appointment. He did not say he was deceived. He did not say new information had come to light. He said the decision was wrong, and he said he had made it. Think about what it takes for a Chief of Staff to write those words publicly. McSweeney did not have to say the decision was wrong. He could have resigned quietly, cited personal reasons, disappeared from the story. He chose to say it, in writing, with his name on it. That is not a man who resigned because the political climate had become difficult. That is a man who had calculated that the only way to survive what was coming was to get ahead of it, to name the mistake before someone else named it for him. But here's the part that matters most. McSweeney resigning did not stop the bleeding, because 24 hours later, Tim Allen was gone too. Tim Allen was Starmer's Director of Communications, the man responsible for managing how this government presented itself to the country, the man who in a political crisis is supposed to be the last person standing, the person who stays in the building, manages the message, controls the damage. The communications director is supposed to be the one who does not resign in a crisis, because his entire job is handling crises. He resigned, and that second resignation tells you something the official statements never will. When the Chief of Staff goes, it is serious. When the communications director goes the following day, it means the people closest to the Prime Minister have concluded that the damage cannot be contained, that there is no message, no framing, No communication strategy on earth that makes this survivable. Tim Allen did not leave because he wanted to. He left because he looked at what was coming and decided he did not want to be standing next to it when it arrived. Two of Starmer's most senior people, gone, in 48 hours. In politics, when the people who know everything, who have seen every document, heard every conversation, read every briefing, when those people decide to leave, they are telling you something. They are telling you that what is coming is worse than what has already been reported. And what had already been reported was bad enough. But wait, because while Downing Street was managing the resignations, something else was happening. Something that has not happened in the entire history of the Labour Party. A Labour heavyweight called for the Labour Prime Minister to resign. Anas Sarwar is not a backbencher with a grudge. He is not a junior minister settling a score. He is the leader of Scottish Labour, a senior figure in the party, a man who campaigns on Labour platforms, who represents Labour values, who is supposed to stand behind the Labour Prime Minister, regardless of what is happening in Westminster. He picked up the phone, called Keir Starmer, told him it was time to go, and then walked to a press conference and said it publicly. His words were precise. The distraction needs to end. The leadership in Downing Street has to change. Think about the calculation that goes into a statement like that. Senior Labour figures do not publicly call for their own Prime Minister to resign without having taken the temperature of the party first. Without knowing that the sentiment they are expressing is shared by enough people that saying it out loud carries more political benefit than political cost. Sarwar made that call because he looked at the landscape of his party and concluded that more Labour MPs and members agreed with him than disagreed with him. That is not a moment of personal courage. That is a carefully calculated political move. And it tells you everything you need to know about how bad things had become inside the Labour Party in those 48 hours. Now here is where it gets insane. The emergency meeting. 400 Labour MPs and peers packed into a room in Westminster. Starmer standing in front of them, not making policy, not discussing legislation, not presenting a plan for the country, begging his own party not to remove him. His exact words: "I have won every fight I have ever been in. I fought to change the Labour Party to allow us to win an election again. But after having fought so hard for the chance to change our country, I am not prepared to walk away from my mandate and my responsibility to my country, or to plunge us into chaos as others have done." Read those words carefully. Read them again. A Prime Minister with genuine authority does not need to remind his own MPs that he has won fights before. A leader who has the confidence of his party does not need to stand in front of 400 of them and argue for his own survival. The speech is evidence. The fact that it needed to be given at all is evidence. Keir Starmer stood in front of his own party and pleaded with them to let him keep his job, and the reason they were willing to remove him was a decision he made with full knowledge of the risks. A decision that produced the biggest political crisis Labour has faced in office in a generation. He was begging. The man who won 411 seats. The man who ended 14 years of Conservative government. The man who stood outside Downing Street and promised the long years of chaos were over. Begging. Join the tens of thousands of people watching this channel, because mainstream media will not show you a Prime Minister begging his own MPs not to remove him. They will show you the prepared statement, the supportive cabinet, the party that rallied behind its leader. They will not show you what it took to get there. Subscribe now. Now let's talk about Kemi Badenoch. Because through all of this, through the resignations, through the coup attempt, through the emergency meeting, through the apology to Epstein's victims, she was watching. She did not grandstand. She did not rush to the cameras with a list of demands. She did not pretend this was a simple story with simple villains. She sat on those opposition benches and waited, and then she said something that will follow Keir Starmer for the rest of his political career. He is like a plastic bag blowing in the wind. We need him to get a grip. And if he can't do it, then someone else in the Labour Party needs to do that, or they should call an election. There is a reason that line landed so hard. It is not just that it is vivid, it is that it is accurate. A plastic bag blowing in the wind does not decide where it goes. It responds to whatever forces are acting on it. When McSweeney pushed for Mandelson, Starmer went with it. When the Epstein files dropped and the pressure mounted, he fired Mandelson. When McSweeney resigned and the calls for his own resignation started, he summoned his MPs and fought for survival. When Sarwar called for him to go, he refused. When the cabinet rallied, he steadied. At every stage, the response was reactive. At no stage did Starmer appear to be the person setting the direction. At no stage did he act. He reacted. Every time, without exception. That is what Kemi was describing. Not a political attack, not a partisan line, an assessment. Calm, precise, delivered without theatre because it did not need theatre. The observation was accurate enough to stand without decoration. And here is why that matters, beyond the politics of the moment. Because the lie at the heart of this entire crisis is an impossible contradiction, and Kemi Badenoch has been the only person in that chamber consistently pointing at it. Keir Starmer has said two things. He has said the official security vetting flagged Mandelson's relationship with Epstein, And he has said he was deceived by Mandelson, who hid the true extent of that relationship. Both of those things cannot be true at the same time. If the vetting process told him about the relationship, and he has confirmed that it did, then the vetting gave him the information before the appointment was made. The system did its job, the warning was delivered, there was no deception by the vetting process. Which means the only version of events in which Starmer was genuinely deceived is a version in which Mandelson told him something directly that contradicted what the official vetting had already said. And Starmer chose to believe Mandelson over his own security service. That is not being deceived. That is choosing to ignore a warning because you want to believe something different. Kemi has put this to him at the dispatch box. She has asked the question in different forms across multiple PMQ sessions. How do you reconcile the vetting flagging, the relationship with the claim that Mandelson hid it from you? And Starmer has deflected every time. Talked about processes, about being misled, about the thoroughness of the review now underway. He has never answered the question, because there is no answer that does not destroy one version of his own account. You know what that means, right? When a politician cannot reconcile two things they have both said publicly, there are only two possibilities. They are lying, or they do not understand the contradiction. Neither possibility is acceptable in a prime minister. Now here is what happens next. And this is the part that mainstream media is already moving away from. Starmer survived the coup. The cabinet rallied. Angela Rayner gave him her full support. West Streeting urged people to give him a chance. The threshold for a formal leadership challenge, 80 Labour MPs, was not reached. He is still Prime Minister, but surviving a crisis and recovering from one are not the same thing. The documents about Mandelson's appointment are being released. The Metropolitan Police have launched a criminal investigation into Mandelson for misconduct in public office. The Epstein files from the United States Department of Justice continue to generate new revelations. Every week that this investigation continues is another week that this government is defined by a decision its Prime Minister made with full knowledge of the risks, and Kemi Badenoch is not going anywhere. She will be at that dispatch box every week. She will ask about Mandelson. She will ask about the vetting report. She will ask about the documents being released. She will ask the question that has no answer, and she will keep asking until the answers arrive, or until Starmer no longer has the political strength to deflect them. Each time she asks, the chamber will remember that she called it, before the resignations, before the coup attempt, before the apology to Epstein's victims. She was already standing there describing a prime minister who could not control his own government, a plastic bag blowing in the wind. And here is the thing about plastic bags. They do not recover their shape once they have been crumpled. They do not return to what they were. They move with whatever comes next. And what comes next for Keir Starmer is a criminal investigation into his former ambassador, a party that came within striking distance of removing him, and an opposition leader who has already written his political obituary in 4 words. He needs to get a grip. This is what the government that promised stability looks like, 8 months in. 2 senior resignations in 48 hours. A Labour leader in Scotland calling for his own Prime Minister to quit. A room of 400 MPs that had to be talked out of a coup. An apology to the victims of a convicted sex offender for the decision to reward his close friend with a prestigious appointment. And a Prime Minister who, when faced with every single one of those moments, did not lead, did not set the direction, did not project the calm authority that the country was promised. He reacted. He survived. He is still there. But surviving is not leading. Surviving is what you do when you have run out of better options. And the country that voted for change, that handed Labour its historic majority, that put Keir Starmer in Downing Street because they wanted something different, that country is watching. Kemi Badenoch is watching too. And she has already told you what she sees. Share this video with everyone you know who voted for this government, expecting something different. Share it with everyone watching a Prime Minister survive a crisis he created. Share it with everyone who deserves the full story of what happened in those 48 hours. Mainstream media will move on from this. They already are. They will give you the recovery narrative, the cabinet unity, the Prime Minister getting back to business. They will not give you the picture of a man standing in front of 400 of his own MPs, arguing for his political life. We will not move on. Subscribe to this channel. Because the only way to hold this government accountable is to make sure everyone sees exactly what it has done, exactly who has been paying attention, and exactly what is still coming. Kemi Badenoch has been paying attention, and she is just getting started.